Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick LUFENIA Plus guide for the ongoing global exclusive event, Malodorous Nights. The synergy units for the fight is Caius from Final Fantasy XIII, Lenna from Final Fantasy V, Trey from Final Fantasy Type 0 and Kain from Final Fantasy IV. The event also marks the debut of Lenna's LD. On this slide, you will see a quick overview of the fight. For this fight, we will be fighting 2 Great Malboro in the first wave and 2 Sahagin Shaman on the second wave. The Great Malboro have 5.5 million HP each while the Sahagin Shaman has 13 million each. The turn requirement is 75 and the HP requirements is 5000. For each wave, they have their own orb conditions. The second wave orb is not a fatal one. Now let's focus on the LUFENIA Orb Conditions. For the first wave fighting against the Great Malboro, the orb will trigger when their HP drop to 79%. The orb will downtick by 1 per party action. The orb countdown ability will be triggered if you cleanse the debuffs inflicted by the Malboro. So, avoid doing that. The orb will be upticked by 6 when every member brave at least 30,000 after your turn ends. There are lots of abilities that fulfill this orb condition. Brave refund abilities will help. If you are using Lenna or Selfie, their S2 will help to uptick the orb. As the Malboro don't have a lot of dangerous HP attacks, focus on preventing the debuffs by bring debuff evasion units like Lenna, Selfie, Ignis, or Apma. Reno and Aerith also work for this requirement, but it will be a bit trickier to execute using them. For the second wave, the orb will start its countdown at the start of the fight. Every player action will downtick the orb by 2. To uptick the orb, you need to have a player ability that grants target at least 80% of max brave in 1 turn. If you meet the conditions, it will uptick by 5 per ally. As the orb uptick is a bit difficult to comprehend, I will be providing some examples. If you are using Selfie, her HP++ and LD will uptick the orb since the attack will brave battery the entire party. If you are using Lenna, her Dragon Breath HP attack and her LD will guarantee to uptick the orb for the entire party. For Purim, her EX ability will uptick the orb for all 3 members and her S2 will only uptick the orb for the target ally. Her follow-up doesn't uptick the orb. For Warrior of Light, his S1 will uptick the orb for the entire party and S2 will uptick the orb for himself. For Rude, his LD will uptick the orb for the entire party and S2 will uptick the orb for himself. I have provided some additional options that I feel it should help to uptick the orb. They are Reigns, Ishtala, Ignis, Katsa, Rosa, Cornelo, and Agrias. The orb is not a fatal one and the boss will be scripted to use them at the 79%, 49%, and 29% HP thresholds. Upon using the countdown ability, the boss will gain a potent buff, Blessing. It is important to dispel it, otherwise you won't be able to uptick the orb. I will discuss more on the orb attack when I am covering the Wave 2 fight overview. Units with Dispel utility is Sid Reigns, Bald Here, Kadich, Yuffie, Ferris, Beatrix, and Cloud. When bringing magic units, it is also important to take note that the Sahagin Shaman absorbs the attacks and they are immune to Elemental Imperil. If you are deploying magic units for the fight, a BT plus Barts is important to enable them. Now let's cover the first wave of the fight. The Malboro will boost their stats via LUFENIA Auras at the following HP thresholds: start of the fight, 79% and 49% HP thresholds. Overall, just keep your party batteried throughout the fight and you should be able to handle the orb. Avoid using any debuffs cleansing ability since it will downtick the orb by 12, which will be instant KO for the run. The Malboro don't have a lot of HP attacks. Most of them provides debuffs like poison. After the 49% HP auras are triggered, it will start to use crunch attack more often, which cleanses all non-frame debuffs. Do watch out for the corrode HP as well. In my opinion, this is a fight target to make you waste your abilities. If you don't bring any dispellers for the party and bringing them a dispel calls, save them for the next wave as you will need it. If you are bringing magic units, make sure you do bring Bart's and make sure he has BT+, otherwise their attacks will get absorbed by the boss. Try to save your burst, summon and burst finisher for the next wave. Try to target to finish this wave within 25 turns. The second wave is where the fight starts to get difficult. Although the LUFENIA countdown ability is not fatal, it can be very problematic. So it is your best interests not trigger it too often other than the scripted HP thresholds at 79%, 49%, and 29%. Unlike other LUFENIA fights, the orb will downtick by 2 per party action and boss actions won't have any impact on the orb. Keep a close eye on the orb if you are using turn spammers like Titus, Shadow, or Jet for the fight. As mentioned previously, the boss absorbs magic and are immune to elemental imperil. Unless the magic unit have their own passive imperil like Bond or they don't need to rely on brave hits to deal damage like Porum or Selfie, it is highly recommended to avoid using them. If you have Bart's with his BT+, he can enable magic units for the fight with his Wind Imperil aura. Sid Reigns is one such example. Have Bart's use either his S1 or S2 to inflict the Imperil aura. As the boss are scripted to trigger LUFENIA countdown ability at the scripted HP thresholds, have a dispel option is important so you can remove the blessing framed buff. Dispel options are Reigns, Valkyr, Kadich, Yuffie, Vanille, Paris, Beatrix, and Cloud. When using magic dispel options, do keep in mind of the brave damage absorb and make sure you have means to break the boss to cleanse after you use them. Diabolo's summon is also another option that offers dispel. Since the boss recast HP attack will hurt a lot and the HP requirements is a tight one, it is important to bring damage mitigation for your party. Examples of damage mitigation options are Orin, Porum, Core and Warrior of Light. Remember to heal up before dealing the finishing blow. Now let's focus on the LUFENIA countdown ability for this wave, Erdgeist's Power. As mentioned previously, other than the timer hit 0, it will be scripted to trigger at the 79%, 49% and 29% HP thresholds. Upon triggering the orb will reset back to 10. Avoid using calls to trigger the thresholds or else you may end up receive unrecoverable HP damage. The countdown ability will grant the boss the blessing buff and inflicts Piscine poison debuff for 2 turns. The blessing buff will grant the boss brave and HP damage resist and doubles its turn rate. The frame debuff Piscine poison will inflicts a brave poison that scales the boss attack stats, halves HP damage down debuff, halves the brave damage resistance and lowers the turn rate. So when both effects are active, your attacks will probably be nerfed very hard. To avoid them, having debuff evasion or dispel the framed buff is crucial. Other the AoE HP attack, the boss will frame their turns for 2 turns where they will be immune to delay or turn deletion. If you using calls for dispelling, try target to push both boss HP together at the same time, so you can dispel the buffs at one swoop. Lastly, let's cover some battle mechanics on Sahagins. When you see one of the Sahagin targeting all, it means it will be using Supplication for Grace. It will provide both Sahagin a whole slew of buffs which include Initiative Brave up, Attack up, Defense up, Speed up and Enfeeblement up. It is important not to allow it trigger the last 3 buffs. With the LUFENIA plus auras of 300%, with the Supplication for Grace buffs, the defenses of the boss will be raised to a whooping 400%. You will probably won't be able to break them unless you use instant break abilities or defense ignore abilities. Caius will help to keep the boss BRV and defenses impact in check with his debuffs and Trey's fatal arrow will guarantee you to be able to break them easily. If one of the Sahagin is killed earlier, the surviving one will enrage and use Supplication of Grace to buff itself. On the slide, you will see a table of the boss moveset. Sahagin will be powered up by the number of buffs that it has on it. So to make your life easier, it is important to block the buff slots with the frame debuffs or overwrite them with debuffs to weaken them. We have come to the end of the boss guide. Hopefully, the information provided in the guide will help you to complete the fight. If you like the video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future related gaming content. All the best for the fight. Bye.